Κύριοι συνάδελφοι, συνεχίζουμε. Ένα πολύ ενδιαφέρον δορυφορικό συμπόσιο. Αποτελεί ιδιαίτερη τιμή και χαρά για μένα να καλωσορίσω σε αυτό το meeting, σε αυτό το συνέδριο, τον καθηγητή Petrovski, ο οποίος είναι Professor of Medicine στο Πανεπιστήμιο Σίδρα στο Κατάρ. Είναι διευθυντής of Medical Affairs στην Medtronic. Το ερευνητικό του έργο εστιάζεται στην τεχνητή νοημοσύνη στον τύπου 1 και στις συσκευές CGM. Dear Professor Petrovski, thank you. Welcome for coming. And thank you for participating in this
Professor Διάλεξη, ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Your title of the lecture is Real-World Performance of MiniMed 780G System in Greece, Achieving Technology-Driven Euglycemia. Your stage is yours.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, καλησπέρα. Ευχαριστώ πολύ for this πρόσκληση, for this invite. So, εγώ μιλάω ελληνικά super λίγο, δεν καταλαβαίνω. So, excuse me for the language. So I will try to give in the next 40 λεπτά. In 40 minutes, I will try to give the talk about the following topics. So again, sorry that I'm not speaking the Greek language, but I'm trying the best. So the agenda for the next 40 minutes will be the MiniMed 780G algorithm. So we're going to deep dive into the algorithm and why we are different from the others together with the outcomes. Then we're going to talk about the real-world evidence and with the special focus in Greece. So we have did the analysis about the MiniMed 780G in Greece, and this is the publication that will come this year. And we're going to discuss, to talk more about these results. And then I would like also to make the reflections about the initiation and the follow-up of the MiniMed 780G from the personal experience, what we have done back in the times in Sidra, how we have initiated that therapy as well. It will be also supported by our all publications. And then we will go beyond the algorithm, our crazy idea that we have found that it is working for most of the people with the type 1 diabetes who are not doing the precise carb counting. And then we'll go with some experiences to show the reflections of the MiniMed 780G in the special cases. So please bear with me. So what about the algorithm? When the MiniMed 780G was designed, actually it's backed up by the previous version of the MiniMed 670G, which was the first automated insulin delivery system. In that period, it was called the hybrid closed loop. This is the second generation, and we had two different goals that were combined together. From one side, to improve the user experience goals, which means to make the fine-tuning of the basic clinical data and the real-world evidence. You know, with the 670G that we have a lot of false alarms, the pricks, the SMBG were there, so we want to minimize and also to eliminate, and then also the exits from the automated insulin delivery system, and of course, this SMBG. But from the other side, we want to maximize the time in ranges, that spend time in the 70 to 180. And also in the last 2 years, we have been focusing also in the time tight range. Then we have shown that the MiniMed 780G even is working much, much better when we're calculating the time tight range. Of course, to lower the A1C, to minimize the risk of the hypoglycemia, and also to maximize, and also to reduce the risk of the hyperglycemia. You know this slide, actually about the algorithm, but I would also like to deep dive about the specific topics of the MiniMed 780G, how the algorithm is designed. So we have the continuous basal insulin delivery every 5 minutes to the target of 100, 110, or 120 milligram per deciliter. In addition, we have auto corrections that it can be kicked in if the glucose is running more than 120 milligram per deciliter. So every 5 minutes if they are needed. In addition of this, there is also safety features, which is called the safe meal bolus and the safe correction bolus. So it means that the algorithm, based on the personal experience, is trying to find the maximal bolus dose for the correction, as well for the food, without causing the hypoglycemia. And we're going to deep dive into that. And the new feature that actually it's also built in is the meal detection technology. So what does it mean? It means that if the bolus is missed, then the autocorrection can be stronger in order to deliver more insulin. So let's see how does it look like. So the first one is the safe correction bolus. We all know that on the old pumps like the 640 and other open loop systems, when we use the bolus wizard, then when you enter the glucose levels, based on the settings, the sensitivity and the target, the bolus wizard will calculate the amount of the insulin. So here, this is the first step. On the top of that, the algorithm will try to find what is the maximal correction dose. So at the first, we can see here that this tiny amount of the auto-basal that are giving every 5 minutes 0.025 units, 0.1 units, 0 insulin sometimes. They're trying to keep the glucose level to the target, let's say 100 milligram per deciliter. If the glucose starts to go higher and reach more than 120 milligram per deciliter, the algorithm is starting to be more aggressive in order to fight with this glycemia. But at one point, because these are the micro tiny boluses, the algorithm will say, okay, this small amount of the insulin, it's not enough. Then I should add an extra insulin correction. And this is the same insulin correction that we are asking the patient that they need to inject with the insulin pen or to enter the glucose level and to go with the open loop system, any kind of the open loop system. So here, the beauty of the algorithm, let's say that this bolus wizard from the open loop system is asking to give 1 unit of insulin. Then, on the top of that, the algorithm will try to look the glucose levels, what it will be with this 1 unit of insulin in the next 2 hours. So it has its own prediction. But this prediction is not only for this bolus, it's on the previous 14 days. So it means that, this 1 unit of insulin, I am predicting that it will go to the low glucose, to the lower threshold. Then I will try to cut by 25%, 0.75. And if this dose, in this case, is again predicting that it will go to the hypoglycemia, then again it will lower the insulin to find the maximal bolus correction dose in order to prevent the possible hypoglycemia. And each time when the insulin for the correction is given, this calculation is done continuously for each correction bolus. Similar to the safe meal bolus, again, so it's used the prediction from the previous up to 14 days to find what is the prediction. So in this case, let's say that the bolus should be consumed. So if we have the carb ratio of 60, the carb ratio of 10, and the person with diabetes is trying to announce the meal with the 60 grams, then the bolus dose will be 6 units. And we all know that on the old pumps and the open loop systems, the insulin that it will be announced, these 6 units will be flashing, and then the user can increase or decrease the insulin dose. Here, the algorithm will take over, and in this case, it will get the prediction for the next 4 hours to take into consideration the postprandial dose. So instead of having only 2 hours, it will go to look at how it will look like for the glucose level with these 6 units of units, regardless the carbs that are also calculated here. And then, again, it will try to reduce the bolus, let's say to 5.1, and in this case, this is the 3.9 units of the insulin reduction. That's why in the system, when we're sitting in the front of our patients, that sometimes this dose can be increased or decreased because of the prediction of the glucose of the glucose in the next 4 hours. And sometimes the glucose can be 135, and we don't see that one. Even when we download the pump, when we look at on the daily basis, you will say why the insulin was decreased when you see the normal glucose values. Because the pump, the algorithm is predicting, and in order to prevent, it cut the insulin, and that's why we have the flat curve after. And the new feature that is very, very beneficial is the meal detection technology. So this is the opposite of the previous one. So what does it mean? It means that the safe correction bolus, we all know how it goes. When the glucose starts to go high, the algorithm is trying to give the maximum basal rate, and in one period, when this bolus maximum autobasal is reached the maximum, then the autocorrections are triggered. So, like in this case here. But then, the algorithm will look at up to 2 hours before if the meal is announced, if the patient entered the carbs. If the meals are not entered, the carbs are not entered, then the algorithm, this is what we call the meal detection technology, the algorithm can increase 20, 30, 40% of extra insulin correction in order to fight the possible hyperglycemia. But with this meal detection technology, there is always the feedback of the safe correction bolus. So it means from the one side, it is trying to double, to triple the correction dose, but from the other side, it's looking for the next 2 hours how the glucose level it will look like in order to prevent the possible hypoglycemia. On the top of that, how the prediction model works. So these are the data that the algorithm will consider. The sensor data, the pump data, and the meal announced data. So it means that over the 24-hour period, the algorithm will try to find the prediction that it will look like this, slowly or even rapidly. And then based on this data, it's trying to automate the pump, the insulin sensitivity, the maximal autobasal, the safe basal, and the glucose prediction model. So the glucose prediction model is what the glucose level will be as a prediction in the next 2, 3, or 4 hours. And they are changed, they are adapted every midnight. This is why we are saying that the algorithm is adaptive and it's personalized, as well with the insulin sensitivity factor. So what does it mean? That tonight, for example, it's 100 milligram, let's say that the correction factor is 25 milligram per deciliter. But tonight, because of all these previous, the algorithm will change and it will adapt. The safe basal rate, it's also when there is no sensor glucose, the algorithm will exit from the smart guard, but in order to go back to the manual mode, it will give a safe basal rate. Now, it's not only one safe basal rate. So it means that we have the average, we have the higher one, but we have the lower one also, in order with the different glucose values. And even without the sensor, the algorithm will adjust in between these two, between 3 different safe basal rate. Why is it between 2 to 14 days? Because sometimes the patient will go out from the smart guard, will not use the sensor. So the algorithm will take 2 to 5 days at first. If there is not enough data, it will look at the 6th, the 7th day, and up to 14 days. MiniMed 780G, it's very easy to set up. Why? Because as you can see here, from the right side, the algorithm is taking the control from almost everything. This is actually the next step, in between step for the fully closed loop that we are preparing. So the autobasal rates, it means that every 5 minutes, we don't need to set. We need to settle the basal rates to initiate. Then the autocorrections are automatic every 5 minutes, up to 12 per hour if they are needed. And also the insulin sensitivity factor is also taken by the algorithm. So the clinician needs to do the 3 points: the carb ratio, the glucose target, and the active insulin time. What we have learned, that it's so simple. We used it's either rule of 360 over the total daily dose. For most of our people with type 1 diabetes, if they're more than 12 years old, we are so confident to start immediately with the optimal settings, which is 100 milligram per deciliter and 2 hours. If there is a concern for the hypoglycemia, then we can go with 110 milligram per deciliter and below 6 years, probably 110 or 120 milligram per deciliter. But the most important is the active insulin time, because it kicks off with a lot of corrections if they're needed. So it means that as a healthcare providers, we need to step back from the changing in the system. Almost everything is taken by the algorithm. So this was the part about the MiniMed 780G and its specifics about the algorithm, how actually it works. But now let's try to make the comparison with the current available systems. These are the systems that are already approved. We have the 780G, the Omnipod 5, the Control IQ, and the CAMS APS. And let's try to deep dive into the 3 different points that are different, because not all AID systems are the same. They have the different algorithm, they have the different targets, how the insulin is calculated, they're completely different. Let's try to see in these 3 points, the basal targets, the autocorrections, and the settings. Let's start first with the basal rates. So from the left side to the right side. So it means that if we have the Control IQ, in order to have the automation, we need to set up the basal rates. And these basal rates are in the automation. So what does it mean? To have the automated insulin delivery system, we need to set up the basal rates. Let's say that we set 1 unit of insulin over the 24 hours. The algorithm will start to decrease the insulin dose based on 1 unit. So if it starts to jump higher, it will start 1.05, 1.07, 0.75, and so on. So it's less automated. Other 3, they have the treat to target. So there is no basal, small amount of the insulin, different targets. Omnipod has the highest, 110. 780G has 100 milligram per deciliter, and the CAMS APS has up to 80 milligram per deciliter. And there are no basal rates here. There are small, tiny amount of the insulin. So this is the first differentiation. Tandem Control IQ as a 1 point with setup of the basal rates. Now let's go to look at the autocorrections. From the left side, 2 systems that they don't have the autocorrections is the Omnipod 5 and the CAMS APS. They have auto basal that is more aggressive, but this is not enough to cover the hyperglycemia. And the users are advised that if the glucose levels is high, to give the correction using the insulin pump. The 2 systems that they have the autocorrections is the Control IQ and the MiniMed 780G. Control IQ can deliver only 1 correction per hour, 60% of the dose. So it means that, remember how the correction dose is calculated? Previously it's 1 unit. If the system needs to give the 1 unit, by default it will go with 0.6 units of insulin. Comparing with the algorithm, with the 780G, that it can go every 5 minutes up to 12 corrections with the maximal bolus correction dose if needed. And this is another differences. And the third one, which actually it's a very important for us as a healthcare providers, from the left side, we can see that we have more settings in the automation that needs to be considered. When we have the Control IQ, we need to consider that we need to set up the basal rates and we need to fine-tune the basal rates. So what does it mean? If we see that during the night, the glucose level starts to go high, we have only 1 correction, so the system is not adapting the basal rates, we need to increase that basal rate. Or if we are seeing the hypoglycemia during the night, or in the period when there is no correction food activity, we need to adjust the basal rate. It's the same what we are doing in the open loop system. And on top of that, we have the carb ratio, the correction factor, and the target glucose that we need to set. Similar to that, but without the basal rates, we have same with the CAMS APS and the Omnipod 5. Correction factor, active insulin time, and the target. So if we are seeing some hyperglycemia, we need to think of these variables in a specific period, or maybe it's a carb ratio, or maybe sensitivity factor I need to change, or maybe active insulin time, or probably maybe the target. With the 780G, we have only 3 settings that we need to set up, And we said usually we use the optimal settings, so there is no rocket science there. And even if you use the rule of 350 or 360, we are going out of the settings in the automation. So it's much, much simpler than with the correction. So this was said, we saw what are the differences with the system. We deep dive completely into the MiniMed 7 ATG. Now let's look at the differences in the outcomes, because we are declaring that there are differences in the algorithm and the differences how the system actually works. And then we have two different analyses that we can do. This is the first meta-analysis. There is no direct studies, head-to-head studies. So one pump to another pump and then to cross over and to look at the data. This is the study performed at the University of Bari in Italy, and it was published almost a couple of months ago. So they have noticed that there are differences between the systems, and they have tried to see if there is a possibility to make some kind of the analysis. This is a very difficult study because we cannot compare one study here and one study there. One study has 7.1 A1C, the other one has 6.9. I'm talking about the endpoint study. It's not, because the characteristics in these RCTs are different. Maybe one study is taking care about the kids, adults, older patients, duration of the diabetes also, so we cannot mix and match. And also maybe the starting point, the baseline hemoglobin A1C, the glycemic outcome. So it means that we cannot compare. But these guys, our colleagues, they were smart. There's a software, there's called this systematic meta-analysis, when all the data is combined together, and they're trying to find similarities, these baseline characteristics from each study, and to compare only that cohorts. So what did they found? They found that the best outcomes are with the MiniMed 7 ATG, almost 21.6% from the baseline studies, and baseline studies are MDI and the pump with the CGM in open loop system. So you can see here that the control IQ is around maybe 6% less. MiniMed 670, 14%, and then comes APS and the French one, it's almost lower. Why Omnipod 5 is not there? Because the first randomized control trial with the MiniMed 7, with the Omnipod 5 was published a couple of months ago, so they were on the market. As a professional, it was a little bit very strange to have the pump on the market and not to have the clinical data. Anyway, they're almost doing the second study. I'm reviewing that article, and I can see that with the Omnipod 5, it's almost on the right side. So it means that when we look at the randomized control trials, the MiniMed 7 ATG outperforms all the other systems. And there's also the real-world evidence. So the real-world evidence, it's something new, because all the data from the CGM, from the pumps, goes up to the cloud. And most of the studies, they cover more than 90% of their users. So it means that if we look at the data, the real-world evidence of the MiniMed 7 ATG in Greece, all the cohorts, all the patients that are using the 7 ATG will be shown in this real-world evidence. And this is, again, what it shows. So we can see here the all users, starting with the Omnipod 5, less than 65%, comparing with the MiniMed 7 ATG, almost 10% up, almost 76%. And when we look at the optimal settings, only two systems declare what are the optimal settings. For the Omnipod 5, this is 110 milligram per deciliter, the lower target. And for us is the 100 milligram per deciliter and the active insulin of 2 hours. And then there is almost 13% differences. So again, with the real-world evidence, we are showing we are outperforming the others. What this 10% of the time in range means? It means the better outcomes. I like in the middle, when I discuss with my patients what really means 10%. 10%, it's only just percentage. But when I discuss with them, I try to make the reflection that it means that more than 1 month per year, you will be in the better outcomes. And there are also consecutive studies which shows that it will prevent the possible complications. Let's go to discuss about the real-world evidence and then the focus in Greece. So we can proudly say that that almost more than 300,000 users are on the MiniMed 7 ATG all over the world. The publication is for 100,000 users with the type 1 diabetes. The data from the 300,000, it's not published, it's on the file, but there are no differences in the outcomes. So what does it mean? It means that 100,000 patients all over the world, they're achieving 72.3% of the A1C. So it doesn't matter where is the user with the MiniMed 7 ATG, Australia, New Zealand, here, Latin America, North America, anywhere in the Europe, they are in the target. They are reaching the target with the time in range, with the time below range, and we look at the GMI, it's 7%. Below 15, it's almost 70%, 69.9, and we look at the above 56%, it's almost 77%. So all users, generally, when we look at these 100,000 patients, they are meeting the criteria. But when we look at the optimal settings, again, 2 hours of active insulin time and the target of 100 milligram per deciliter, it means that the optimal settings go to 78.8% time in range, which is the same what it was done in silico studies before the pump was introduced, and this is the same number also with the pivotal trial, the first study done by the regulatory. When we look at the younger ones, below 15 years, it's 76%, and above 56, it's 82%. Now you will ask, why 15 and 156? Because of the data protection in Europe, we could not put the date of birth. Finally, starting with the new care link from September, in a couple of days, the users can just add the month of the birth and the year of the birth. And then for the next analysis, you're going to see more natural groups, like below 2 years, below 7 years, adolescents, young adults, and others. So that's why in Europe we cannot made before. And then with the optimal settings, we can reach more than almost 90% of the participants to get to the target. So 9 from 10 participants, the users that will initiate the 7 ATG, they will be in the target. And then from the clinical perspective, when the patient with type 1 diabetes will come to the clinic and they want to choose the different systems, said that's fine, but let's discuss to find what is the best one. All other systems, they need to do the correction. So if the patient is fine to do the correction with the hyperglycemia, that is good, that's fine. So they need to understand that with the other system, they need to do the corrections. But another important point is this data, which means that if you initiate other system, 30 to 40% is the chance that you will reach the target. And this is the data from the other studies. 30 to 40% of the participants in the studies are reaching the target. With the MiniMed 7 ATG, 80 to 90% are reaching the target. So it means that 8 to 9 from 10, they will reach the target. So now let's go to look at how Greece is doing. So we were working hard for the last couple of months in order to see what is the data, how the data in Greece look like. Are you surprised? I'm not. 75.2%. Because I know a lot of physicians like you in Greece that you're doing a very good job. So you're dedicated with your patients. You're doing much, much better than the general. 72.3% was the general, remember, all over, but you're about 3% higher. And this is significantly higher. So again, users on the MiniMed 7 ATG in Greece, which are 2,500, they are in the target. So generally, all users who are here, they are reaching almost the target, no hypoglycemia. And look at the GMI, 6.8%, 0.2% less than the average. And 75% almost 3 from 4 patients that are using the system, they're in the target. So this gives us an option to go and even to negotiate more with the healthcare authorities, with the NHS, because 3 to 4 patients are reaching the target. But it's not that only from the real-world evidence in Greece. Look at the optimal settings, 78.5%. And another information that is also here, if you look at here, so it means that 20% of the population on the 780G, they are using the optimal settings. This is much higher than the other European country. So that's why one of the predictor is the optimal settings. So you have much more patients who are using the optimal settings. And then look at from the right side, what is the number of the patients achieving the target? Almost 9 to 10%, similar to the others. So 9 to 10% using the optimal settings, they are reaching the target. Let's look at the groups. Again, below 15, much better, 74.1%, and the credit goes to the pediatrician because they really know how to do the job. Remember that it was 70% in the real world evidence, and 56 much better. When we look at the timing ranges before and after, we can see here that around 8 to 10% in all age groups, there is improvement in the timing range. And this is significant improvement. This is a little bit more complicated slide, but it comes from the manuscript that shows the percentage in the international guidelines for the outcomes. So we can see here that more than 60, 70, 80% they are reaching almost each target of the international consensus. This is also a very, very important slide that shows the clinical practices in Greece that are completely different than the Europeans. I mean, in the better outcomes. So when you look at this is the 12 months follow-up. So in Greece, starting from 78.5%, ending up with 77.7%. 1%, which is not significant. So it means that the glucose levels remains almost the same. In other countries, we have shown that there is a slightly decline. Decline especially in the pediatric range. There are 2 scenarios here that probably are not the same. So this is like the open discussion. The first, because some of the patients, they have missed the follow-up, the algorithm is trying to catch up with these possible changes, and that's why there is no so much decrease in the timing range. Here, probably the patients are coming on the regular clinical visits, so there's no waiting line like in the UK, for example. And in the children, for example, the carb ratio needs to be updated. In the next period, I would like to discuss more about the initiation and the onboarding process. And this is one of the first studies that we have performed in Sidra with the MiniMed 780G. And look at the data. Those are children. The average was 12 years. So we can see here, even the 7 days of the automation, when we initiate the 780G, we were almost to the 70%. And look at the 18 months. More than 70%. So we are reaching the target without possible hypoglycemia. What about the A1C? 8.6 the baseline. Okay, this was done actually during the COVID times. So that's why this baseline hemoglobin A1C is slightly higher, but then significant improvement to 6.5 just in 3 months. And again, more than 70% are reaching the target in 3 months, and those were the same in the next period. This is the protocol that actually was built not only for the study, but it's a clinical practice pathway. You can see here that we have the step number 1, which is if the patient is interested for the pump therapy, they will ask every second Thursday, 9 a.m., the group of patients 10 to 15, and they will discuss expectation, responsibilities, and what is the process. With the green one, we can see here that this is the step number 2, easy training and education, just 3 days, group education. The following Sunday, because this is the first working day in the Middle East, we initiate the manual mode, and then on Wednesday, we initiate the smart guard, and then we have the 7 and the 14 days. And this is the clinical pathway what we are using. All the physicians, all the healthcare providers start with the same initiation. These are the basal rates, the carb ratio, the targets that actually are used. After that, we went to the simplification. So what does it mean? Our protocol, and like the others, if you are not doing the proper carb counting, I'm really sorry, I cannot initiate the pump therapy because this was the criteria. And we all know from our practices that not everyone person with a type 1 diabetes is doing the proper carb counting. And also it's the burdensome. And then we ask ourselves, is it possible, can we simplify the carb entry using the MiniMed 780G, saying the previous autocorrections, safe meal bolus, safe correction bolus, as well the meal detection technology? Is the MiniMed 780G enough to go beyond those barriers? And before the study, we have a lot of doubts about this one. Should we run and should we not run? So look at this patient. This is the patient on the multiple daily injections, having only 8% of the time in range. And this patient is not eligible for the pump therapy because probably the patient is missing boluses, some basal dose. When we initiate the 780G, we reach 50%. We are not at the target, but 50 is much better than the 8%. And then when we look at the insulin delivery, look at here. 96% of the insulin is delivered by the automation. 0.6 mil announcement. So 1 bolus per day was announced. And then we ask ourselves, maybe there is something that we can do to improve to simplify. Look at this patient, 780G, 69% of the time in range. Much, much better. And look at from the right side. Look at here. No boluses for the single day. So how it's possible, this one without boluses to have 69%, and the previous one with some boluses having 50%. Again, it's almost the same. All the insulin is given by the automation. This lady was smart. She was only snacking 20 to 30 grams per meal. So it means that if you eat small amount, the autocorrection using the automation can overcome these glucose values. So it means that, again, this is the question, so probably this can be a reason to dig out more. And that's why we made this simplified meal management. We went to the randomized control trial, 2 different groups, and the aim was to assess the contribution of the precise carb counting to the glycemic control, comparison to the simplified meal announcement. Adolescents, 12 to 18 years, 34, randomized into 2 groups, fixed protocol, small, medium, large meal, comparing with the standard protocol, which is the precise carb counting. The study ran for 3 months and additional 9 months. Now we have the 18 months data. Primary endpoint was the time in ranges, differences, as well in the secondary, the all other insulin and glycemic outcomes, as well the safety endpoints by the severe hypoglycemia and the ketoacidosis. And look at the data. We were positively shocked. Both groups, they were having the time in range below 50%. After that, after the initiation, the flex group almost 80%, and this is what we have expected, because this is something which is expected with the optimal settings, but the group with the flexible, with the small, medium, and large, they were in the target. So it means that, yes, if you're doing small, medium, and large, you can achieve the target and you can be in the safe zone. And this data actually was sustained for the next 18 months. And look at the A1C here. So starting from almost 8%, 6.6, 6.8, no differences in the both groups. And then when we look at the insulin distribution, those patients who were in the group in the fixed regimen, they have almost double corrections comparing with the flexible insulin regimen. And this is normal because the pump is forgiving this unpreciseness in the pump therapy. Why the study was successful? because we were using our optimal settings. 360 rule for all and 2 hours. And this is the calculation how we did. 60% of the total carbs divided by 3 are the large meal. So it means that 60% the distribution of the all carbs that are eaten per day were divided by 3, and this was giving the normal meal, the regular meal. 50% more, it was the large meal, and 50% was less was the small meal. So what we did, even we simplify. We rounded by 10 grams, and for the snack, we said it will be 15 or 20 grams. This is based by the calculation. So we have upgraded our protocol. So what does it mean? It means that previously we were asking the precise carb counting. So what does it mean? Now we have the meal assessment tool. Based on of the patients and of this questionnaire, we are going to allocate the patient either with the precise carb counting on the fixed or the fixed insulin regimen. And even we went further, which shows that the plate recognition process that we are using for those patients who cannot understand the precise carb counting. As you all may be aware, that the type 2 diabetes, now we have the CE mark that the 780G can be used. And this is the study that it was done in the US for the regulatory, which shows that the MiniMed 780G can be used in the type 2 diabetes on the safe manner, and it can increase the time in ranges to improve the glycemic outcomes. But also the subgroup of this study shows that the GLP-1 and the SGLT2 inhibitors can be used in a safe manner in addition to the MiniMed 780G, because this was the regulatory study. This type of the therapy was an add-on therapy before initiating the MiniMed 780G. Again, we got also the approval in Europe, the CE mark, for using the 2 to 6 years, so in the children. So finally, there's not any more off-label prescription that what we were using before, because we all knew that it's beneficial. And this is the Lenny study that is published in Lancet, randomized trial, crossover study, 12 weeks and 12 weeks, and these are the average age 4.7. Most of them, they were on the sensor-augmented pump therapy. Around maybe 20% were using the MDI, and there is also the improvement in the A1C from 7.6 to 7 significantly, and improvements in the time in ranges to almost 68.4% without increased risk of the hypoglycemia. Again, this was the regulatory study, which means that we were seeking for the CE mark and approval from the authorities. Now the subgroups, sub-analysis were done to look at the predictors for the better outcomes. And another point that actually what the parents were telling us, that there is also reducing the user-initiated boluses. So look at in the open loop and also in the previous therapy. 60% where the boluses were announced. Now those were reduced to 40%. So what does it mean? That the 20% of the insulin now it's for the corrections. So there are no more any manual corrections. Let's deep dive a little bit in the next couple of minutes for the case scenarios. High A1C, easily we can improve the glucose control in the patients who are with a high hemoglobin A1C. Our inertia for the children that they are having around 7% of the A1C, we can find out, so we can reveal the possible hypoglycemia. During Ramadan, there are a lot of studies that we have performed that the fasting can be easily adopted during the Ramadan. COVID positive, and several studies are showing that yes, sometimes when you have the mild sickness, it can be taken by the autocorrections. Short stature in the type 1, we have published the article that shows that it can be safely used. The autocorrections with the active insulin time of 2 hours can improve the glucose control. In this case, we all know that the weight gain can be easily done with the automated insulin delivery system, because just press the button, or if you don't press the button, you will have the better glucose control. But then we need to discuss, and this is what we are doing now. We are discussing, even in the introduction session, the healthy lifestyles. And this will be the future of the fully closed loop systems. Off-label use, we went even further. This is the 14 months old boy look at here the glycemic control. Again, off-label use. Even when with the neonatal diabetes, off-label use, with the diluted insulin, it can be also used. So these are the other areas that we want also to investigate. But the automated insulin delivery system, they have one point, which means that we need to look at, like in this case, from the left side, we need to look at the behavioral changes and then the system settings. So the automated insulin delivery systems and the future will be hands-off from the pumps. There will be no more settings. So only behavioral changes, and we'll have more time to spend about the healthy lifestyle, eating habits, exercise, and the quality of life. So this is the future of the automated insulin delivery systems. And I would like to finish with this slide, which shows the algorithm in action. Look at this patient, 83% of the time in range. And what we can see here, the full action of the algorithm. If we look at during the night, this is the only system that I'm confident that during the night, if your glucose is high, you can go to sleep because the algorithm is trying to give the autocorrection, the auto-basal, and the glucose level most of the time will go back to the normal. But then the beauty comes with the boluses. The algorithm is adjusting, like we said in the first slides. Look in this case, it should be 2.5. Then the algorithm decided to give 2.6, slightly increase of the bolus. The second one should be 2.5 units. Then the algorithm adjust, no, I will cut the insulin by 1 unit. And this is significant decrease in order to prevent the hypoglycemia. And this one, it's okay, it's 2.5, the bolus visitor said 2.5, the algorithm confirms. The third one, instead of giving 5 units, 4.1 units. Again, adjustment. So when we look at these 5 boluses, more than 60% of them, they are adjusted by itself. So I will conclude here, and if you have any questions, I'm really happy to answer. And again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Professor Petrovski, for the very informative and excellent presentation. Any question from the audience? I would like to start. Θα έλεγα ότι το σύστημα της αντλίας 780G έχει αλλάξει κυριολεκτικά το τοπίο στον τομέα των αντλιών ινσουλίνης και των αισθητήρων γλυκόζης. Είναι η μέρα με τη νύχτα, θα λέγαμε, με τα προηγούμενα συστήματα, στα 25 χρόνια περίπου που ασχολούμαι με αυτά τα συστήματα, από την αρχή που πρωτοήλθαν. Το μόνο που χρειάζεται να εισαγάγει ο ασθενής στο σύστημα αυτό είναι την ποσότητα των υδατανθράκων. Τα υπόλοιπα θα τα κάνει μόνη της η αντλία. Χρειάζεται καλή εκπαίδευση του ασθενούς, ωστόσο, στα συστήματα αυτά και ένας αυστηρή προϋπόθεση βέβαια είναι ο αυστηρός υπολογισμός της ποσότητας των υδατανθράκων που χρειάζεται αυτό. I have some questions for you,
Please, I'm
Professor. First, why do you think for the success, is there a reason for the success in Greece in the time in range? Why
what are the drivers, what are the predictors for the better outcomes? Look, I have been here for around 1 year. I have visited a lot of physicians, and I can proudly say that they know what they're doing. So the spark that they're having, how they treat the diabetes, so they know how to practice. They use the optimal settings. They have a good relationship with the patients. So like the old, physician and patient communication. If you go back to North Europe, believe me, I can see, that it's like the Dr. Google there. There's no trust, mostly in between. But here I can say that, there's a huge trust in between. So the patients are believing to the physicians. And also the fine-tuning and the follow-up visits. So I believe that these are the two main factors. The first, that the physicians, they're knowledgeable, they know what they are doing. And from the other side, the patients in the Southeast Europe are completely different than the North Europe.
Thank you. The second question is, during last year, we found a discrepancy between the estimated hemoglobin A1C and the measured hemoglobin A1C from the laboratory. Not only with your CGM system, but with the others. What do you believe? Is there a reason? What can we do? Sorry to translate. Ιδιαίτερα τον τελευταίο χρόνο βλέπουμε ότι υπάρχει μια διαφορά ανάμεσα στον γλυκοζηλιωμένη αιμοσφαιρίνη, την τιμή που δίνει το CGM, και στην τιμή της γλυκοζηλιωμένης αιμοσφαιρίνης που μετρούμε από το εργαστήριο. Και ερωτώ τον καθηγητή αν υπάρχει κάποιος λόγος για τον οποίο συμβαίνει αυτό ή αν έχει κάποια πληροφορία παραπάνω να μας δώσει.
So there is always a difference between the hemoglobin A1C and also the GMI. But this should not be more than 0.2 to 0.5%. It can be. But what we have noticed, and this is not on a daily basis, but we are seeing a lot of complaints from the physicians that are coming to us, and they are showing hemoglobin A1C and the GMI discrepancy of 1 or 2%. If there is no hemoglobinopathy, that usually is not, what we have found? We have found that usually the generated report, it's on the 2 weeks basis. It's not enough. So we need to at least to have the 90 days of the data to try to correlate with the current A1C and the GMI. This is the first point. And even if we have 90 days, we need to look at what is the percentage of the sensor use. So it means that maybe the patient was using only 30 to 40%. And then from these 90 days, we're going to have only, let's say, 30 or 40 days. So again, this can be the difference, the discrepancies. About the future, about what I will trust, I always combine both of them. So it means that the A1C, it's a good parameter for the complications because it's still, with the reimbursement policy, it's still there. But for the short term and for the prediction how the patient is doing and what will be for the next easy adjustment, especially in the pregnancy, then the time in ranges will be also beneficial. But there, the time will come in the future that actually the time in ranges will become the standard of care, that you don't need to take the hemoglobin A1C. But then the question will be the time in range or the time in tight range. So there are a lot of open questions.
This measurement from 90 days, is it possible with your CGM?
It's possible, yes.
Okay. Yeah. Any other question before the last? Okay. Κυρία Μητράκου.
Στα μέτρηξ του τελευταίων 14 ημερών από το CGM και να διορθώνεις με ένα φάκτορ και τότε να βρίσκεις. Υπάρχει πολλή βιβλιογραφία πάνω.
Ναι, ευχαριστούμε. Ευχαριστούμε την κυρία Μητράκου. Ναι. Ναι, πέστε το.
So look, if you tell the patient to omit the small snacks, they will omit everything. There's also another study that shows that 20 grams unannounced, they don't impact the time in range. So we all know. And even in our study, that this 20 plus or minus shows that there is no impact. I will still wait, I will ask the patient to announce the meal, for each, in order to go to the 80%, but with some of the patients, it's not possible. So it means that in this case, this is fine. But in the next 2 years, you know, this will be deal done. We're not going to have.
And I have a second question. The patients that do omit the carbs, and it seems to compensate by the algorithm. Is the algorithm operated upwards? So if they start meal announcement, then they would be in trouble with 5%.
No, this can go. So, of course, that if you announce 60 grams and you don't eat, you eat only 10 grams or 5 grams, or you don't eat everything, of course, that there will be the hypoglycemia. But I think that your question was to announce the meal and then how the algorithm will adapt.
If you don't announce, then will the algorithm, the basal rhythm upgrade slowly, day by day?
Yes.
Would you advise patients to start announcing? Because we see patients that come in and we start advising them to start announcing.
But if the patients are not announcing the meals, we'll have more autocorrections. Correct. But it means that even midnight, the algorithm will adjust. So it will have the stronger basal rate. Instead of, let's say, 0.01 unit, it will go to 0.05 units. And the sensitivity factor will be much higher. And on the top of that, the meal detection technology will kick in with more insulin. So that's why it was much, much easier for us to develop the fully closed loop, and the feasibility studies are done. So probably these results I cannot share. It will be presented during the ATTD next year. So we have closed the fully closed loop.
Any other? And my last question. I know you're working in the closed loop system. When will be it available in the market?
On the market, so there are two different, so Medtronic currently MiniMed, because from the next year we are going to be the MiniMed, we are working on the several pads. So the first one is the collaboration with Abbott, the new sensor that will be produced with the MiniMed 780G, 14 days, and we're expecting that in the US it will start this year. So that means that we'll have the 14-day sensors. Europe will be next year. So this is the first, and parallel there are several of them. The fully closed loop system, the feasibility studies are done.
Are done?
Feasibility studies are done, yeah, feasibility. And we are starting, actually this month, we are starting the regulatory and the reimbursement studies. And these are the three, so two different. And we are working with the algorithm. Parallel with that, we are working with the two different systems. So the first one is the screenless pump. So just to remove that, everything will be on the mobile phone, smaller pump, tube pump, and we are working with the patch pump. And we have the smart MDI. Our future is not to have only one system. Is to have several of them, a patch pump, a small pump, and also the smart MDI. And the user can choose on a daily basis what they want to use. So it means that today I wear the tie and I wear the suit. Tomorrow I will wear the sport shoes. And everything, so this is another project that it's finished, that when you have the mobile phone, you said, okay, today I use smart MDI. All the data is transferred to the pen. All calculations are done there. Tomorrow, you want to go to use the patch pump, you use the patch pump. So bear with us in the next couple of years. Okay. You can measure in one hand.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aristopoli.